Hey guys, it's Mike here, and welcome to another video. I'm bringing you here today talking about Dragon Ball Z and asking the question more specifically, is it time for another Dragon Ball Z live-action movie to be made? Now, of course, a lot of people's immediate gut reaction and knee-jerk reaction is going to say, well, Mike, what about Dragon Ball Evolution? Don't you remember how horrible that was? Don't you remember how each and every single one of us, as Dragon Ball fans, really revile that film and hate that film with every single essence? Haven't you seen Chris Stuckman's review where he destroys that movie? And absolutely, I do. In fact, I saw that movie when it came out. I remember every single moment as that film was being in production coming up until it finally debuted in theaters. And in fact, we all know it was so bad to the degree that even recently, Ben Ramsey, the writer of Dragon Ball Evolution, came out and even issued an apology for writing the film in the first place. So people, of course, are going to look at this and immediately, I'm sure many of you are commenting down below and saying, no, this is stupid, screw you, let the dislikes come. But the fact of the matter is, let's think about this objectively, and let's think about this while regarding other film franchises. Because other film franchises and other characters have come back from much worse than what we saw with Dragon Ball Evolution. For example, let's look at Batman. Now, does anyone remember the movie Batman and Robin? Well, I certainly do. I in fact remember going to see that movie in theaters. And I remember just how completely different it was than I expected it to be even as a kid. I remember how cheesy it was. I remember the bat suit nipples, the bat credit card that the nostalgia critic so loves to discuss. And I remember every little horrible pun that they decided to stick in there, especially with Uma Thurman's Poison Ivy character. And after that movie came out, everyone said, we're done with Batman movies. They're terrible. They cannot come back from this. Nothing could possibly save this franchise. We're done with live action movies. So we had pretty much all these DC animated films, or these DC animated series, such as Batman the Animated Series, Batman and Superman Adventures, which eventually went on to become the Justice League, and Justice League Unlimited. However, people still love the characters and the franchise so much that when Batman and Robin was still fresh in our memories, they decided to once again reboot it. And in many ways, because of what we ended up getting with the Christopher Nolan trilogy, with Batman Begins, with The Dark Knight, with The Dark Knight Rises, which took such a drastic tonal shift from Batman and Robin, from cheesy and campy to realistic, gritty, and dark, like the Frank Miller comics, like Batman Year One. It ended up actually being a benefit to all of us as fans of the series and of Batman as a character that Batman and Robin came out, because Batman and Robin showed Hollywood and showed people exactly what they should not do in a Batman movie, and more what the audience as a whole wanted to see, because that movie really served as a litmus test in many ways for what the audience was prepared for and what they expected of a film of that series. So in many ways, we can look at Dragon Ball Evolution in the same token and say, is it possible that Dragon Ball Evolution, in fact, was a positive for Dragon Ball as a whole? Now, when you think about it, of course, again, that was a terrible movie, Mike. What are you talking about? But let's think about it. Dragon Ball Evolution is the reason why Akira Toriyama came back to Dragon Ball. He was so de-incentivized by seeing that film. He was so angered by the fact that Fox said, no, you're not going to be involved in this movie. We don't want any of your ideas. We're going to do whatever we want because we think we're better than you. And we think we know better than you in the source material. And then Akira Toriyama said, I'm going to work on this Battle of Gods movie. I'm going to work on Resurrection F because I had this idea that I wanted to make into a movie, and now I'm going to work on Dragon Ball Super. So in many ways, when you think about it, Dragon Ball Evolution actually saw the benefit of Dragon Ball as a franchise, because it basically brought about what QAAMAN and many of my other YouTube contemporaries has regarded as the Dragon Ball Renaissance. The rebirth, as Renaissance would mean, of Dragon Ball as a whole, to make it a new series, to make it something even bigger. So again, wouldn't it make sense to capitalize on all of this by trying to do live action movies? And again, there's going to be people who are going to say, but Mike, it's an anime film. Come on, didn't you see the animation? Don't you see how ridiculous all this stuff that happens in these movies are? It's impossible to adapt these to a live-action film. I mean, come on, Mike, stop being such a freaking idiot. Well, you know what they used to say the exact same thing about that now is massive? Comic book movies. In fact, Captain America's Civil War is right about to come out, or it might have already been come out by the time you've seen this video, and by the time this has come out, it's probably already on track to make more than every other Marvel film in the past. And all this started with the Iron Man film. Now, when Iron Man first came out, no one believed that you could create this gigantic cinematic universe with all of our favorite comic book characters straight off the comic put into movies and in real life, doing all these ridiculous comic booky things like having the Infinity Gauntlet, or having Thor's hammer, or having Asgard, and having all of these different fantastical elements represented. And yet, now look what we're seeing. Now every single person accepts it. We're even getting a Doctor Strange movie now, which for years and years, you know, Kevin Feige wanted to do with the first phase of Marvel, but everyone thought was too ridiculous. So we continue to see all this adapted, and all of the Marvel fans, for the most part, are happy. Every single person, the next Marvel film that comes out, are clamoring, whereas 10 years ago, people were just saying, oh, you know, I'll go see Batman, but, you know, these comic book movies, you know, they're still kind of for nerds. They're still kind of for people, you know, that didn't really do anything in high school, you know, that were kind of, you know, rejected. But now when we look at it, they're the biggest thing going. And then there was other things, of course. You might be saying, well, that's just one example. Look at Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings also is something they said for so many years, decades, could not be made into live action films. They're too big, too vast, too much stuff going on, and yet they ended up becoming one of the greatest film franchises in the history of cinema. They ended up becoming a massive trilogy that ended up winning and sweeping the Oscars in its third film, and arguably all of them are just as good as that film and really should have swept every single year, especially with Fellowship of the Ring in regards. But again, I think that you might be starting to see now that there's so many examples throughout the course of elements of fiction that people have stated could not be made into live action films. But ultimately, the greatest question comes down to this. If they decide to remake Dragon Ball as films, if they decide to try and make either Dragon Ball from the beginning or Dragon Ball Z, kind of like the Lord of the Rings way, and then have Hobbit, you know, afterwards, with maybe perhaps Dragon Ball being a prequel trilogy or series, how would they go about doing this? Would they actually stick to the source material? And even though in the past we could have said Fox is the biggest issue and the biggest determinant in the way of this, when we look at Deadpool was something that Fox created, and it stuck so closely to source material. It was rated R, and it did everything that the fans really wanted, resulting in a gigantic success where it ended up being the largest, highest gross rated R movie of all time, surpassing even Terminator 2 and, you know, Matrix Reloaded, which maybe I'll get in someday about how I actually feel about that movie. But the fact of the matter is that I feel that now in this current environment, with people, you know, especially in Hollywood nowadays, probably starting to realize that maybe we should respect this source material that much more. Maybe we should allow the violence to, you know, play up to the amount that it actually does in the source material. Maybe we should give fans what they've actually been asking for so long. When we see all this happening, then we could say perhaps, okay, maybe now is a better climate for them to finally make these movies. And honestly, I have watched this series over and over and over. I've reread the manga over and over and over, and honestly, pretty much every time I do at this point, I'm always thinking of how you could break this down into films, how you could actually write this to happen in a screen transitional format and adaptation, and I really think that this is possible, and I'm really one of those people who, in the end, forever, if this never happens, I'm still going to forever say, this can be made into live action films. And hopefully after watching this video, you know, and hearing my thoughts about this, because I felt the need to talk to you face to face about this issue, you know, in this kind of vlog format, because honestly, I feel like this is such a personal issue that all of us feel really on the inside about really strongly one way or the other. I feel like, honestly, it's time to make another one, or it's time for the wheels to be set in motion for this to happen. As long as Toriyama's on board, as long as we get someone who really is a fan, and we actually get a good budget behind it, we get everything in place. Because obviously this is going to take so many big, ifs and buts, and so many big things, happening just for this to go right. But that happened with all these other great examples that I've mentioned in the past, and I think, at least it's worth another try, because it's been enough time since Dragon Ball Evolution came out, and honestly, if this ends up being successful, this will make Dragon Ball and fans of Dragon Ball that much better, because so many more people will experience what we've loved for so long, and will use the films as an introductory so that they could watch the series as well, so they could read the manga as well, so that everything will take off in a much bigger way and benefit all of us in the end. And I know as Dragon Ball fans, that's probably what we all truly want in the end, for everyone to be able to enjoy what we've loved for so long. Well, my name is Mike, and this has been another video I was bringing you today, talking about my thoughts on a live-action Dragon Ball film. Do you agree with my thoughts? Do you disagree? Let me know down below. I really want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear if you, why you would disagree with my opinions, what you think of my argument that I made today. I really want to know, because this is a really, big deal. Let me know down below, and don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And as I always say, stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Don't forget to subscribe.
Do it now. What do you wait?
Do it now, you puny man. Who cares about the universe 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1?
Blah.
I'm from the universe of biceps. Blah.